So our speaker tonight is Nina Sevilla. She works at the NRDC's federal policy advocacy, and she facilitates learning across cities by sharing successes and lessons learned from NRDC's Food Matters project to a network of partners across the nation. She also works with those partners to run a consumer education campaign, Save the Food, to reduce household food waste. Prior to joining NRDC, Nina worked to increase food access through child nutrition programs at the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona, yay, in Tucson. She holds a bachelor's degree in environmental studies from Bates College and is based in NRDC's San Francisco office. So take it away, Nina. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Donna. Thanks for the intro. I know it was last minute, but it's all good. And NRDC stands for Natural Resources Defense Council. We're a national nonprofit focused mostly on policy advocacy, but we work across environmental issues from land use and ocean conservation to urban sustainability to regenerative agriculture. And I sit on our health and food team where we have a food waste team. And I'm going to share more details about that later. But first, I just wanted to say thank you all for having me. Thank you for inviting me, Donna. Excited to talk with you all about this. So like Donna said, I used to live in Tucson for a few years from 2016 to 2018. And I worked at the Community Food Bank. And yeah, Tucson always has a special place in my heart. So when Donna reached out to my team, I was excited to see that. So before I get started, I'd just love to know who is all in our virtual room. Maybe you could just drop it in the chat, who you are, what organizations you're representing, or if you're representing yourself or something. But it could help. I can help kind of like tailor whatever I'm going to say to that. And before I share my screen, I also just wanted to share a little bit about why I do this work and why I think this is super important, because I think food it's central to who we are in our culture, and it's a connector, and it really brings people together. And I really believe that everyone has the right to healthy and affordable food, and the food system we have right now is not working, and we need one that, you know, better meets the needs of everyone in our society, and also one that doesn't waste a lot. So that's kind of led me through the Community Food Bank and then into the work at NRDC. And I also think this makes it unique from other climate solutions like electric vehicles or building electrification, because it is so personal and so cultural, which makes it exciting to work on, but also maybe more difficult in some senses too. Because as I'll share through my presentation, there's not like a silver bullet or just one thing that we can do, and there won't be any excess or wasted food, but there's like little things we have to do across all sectors. So without further ado, I'll start sharing my slides, and I'm gonna try to, I'll try to keep this to 30 minutes so we can chat, which might mean I run through some slides quickly. And I also just wanted to say that sometimes my internet might freeze. It does it like once an hour. So I will come back quickly, hopefully. Cool. And then I would also say, feel free to drop questions in the chat as I talk, and I'll try to watch the chat, but we'll definitely have time at the end to chat more. And thank you all for sharing in the chat already. So let me share my screen. Can you all see the screen? Awesome.
Yes, we can see that.
Great, thank you. So today I was asked to speak about food loss and waste, share some of the findings from NRDC's report, and then some of our other work. So I'm going to start with just that, setting the scene a little bit of the food waste problem and NRDC's wasted report. And I know that some of you are probably familiar with this already, but maybe some of you aren't. So I'm just going to start kind of as if no one has heard anything. And then I'll share more about our work with cities and then some of the tools we have developed to support this work and keep it moving forward. So really quick, like I said, NRDC is a national environmental advocacy nonprofit. We have, our headquarters are in New York, but we have offices in DC, San Francisco, Chicago, Denver, Bozeman. There's about 600 employees, so quite a bit larger than where I'm coming from at the Community Food Bank of Southern Arizona. So different scale a little bit. And NRDC's bread and butter is really policy advocacy. So we're not so much like a community-based group, but kind of we have different projects, different place-based projects. And then we kind of use that to inform state and federal policy and a bunch of different things. So I just wanted to share this quotation, which kind of underlines some of the reasons why I was articulating about why I think food is so important. And this is from the Eat Lancet Commission summary. I think a report was issued, this report came out in 2019 maybe. And their quote is that food is the single strongest lever to optimize human health and environmental sustainability on Earth. We know agriculture causes a lot of greenhouse gas emissions and environmental degradation, but it also has to be part of the solution. So why do we work on food waste at an environmental organization? Primarily because food waste has serious environmental impacts. We found that up to 40% of all the food in our country goes uneaten, which could be enough to feed a lot of people. But in addition to that, when we waste the food, we waste all of the inputs that have gone into growing it and transporting it and processing it and cooling, storing it, and all of that, as well as all the land and water that went into growing it, and cropland and fertilizer and all of those inputs. And so that's part of the reason why we work on food waste. And I will say that by food waste, we mean any food that is not eaten and that ultimately could end up disposed of in a landfill. And I also just wanted to share, as this is a little nerdy, but bear with me, that we like to talk about why are we even using the term waste for these things like food, because ultimately it's not actually a waste. It can be a resource and it should be recycled into compost and back into nutrients into the soil. So food waste is a term we use right now, but it has its own issues too. And just to further underscore that, this is a diagram from Project Drawdown, which has analyzed the top 100 most impactful interventions to address climate change. And the size of the circles are kind of like the percentages and the relative impact each strategy would have. And food waste is a big chunk, and it in fact ranks #1 in their list of the top 100 most impactful climate interventions. So if we can eliminate food waste, that would make a big difference. And according to ReFed, one of our other partners, who is a nonprofit that focuses solely on food waste reduction, food waste accounts for about 4% of US greenhouse gas emissions. So now I'm going to jump a little bit deeper into NRDC's wasted report, which you can see on this screen. And before I do that, I'm going to do a quick poll to lead into these findings. So feel free to put the what you think the answer is, A, B, C, or D in the chat, but how many cars worth of greenhouse gas emissions does food waste create annually? Is it 360 million, 37, 13, or 3? And it was actually on one of my earlier slides. I just realized as I was showing it, but it is indeed equivalent to 37 million cars. The greenhouse gases from food waste from the whole spectrum from farm to disposal. And then second and last question is, which of the following sectors do you think is most responsible for the majority of wasted food? Farms, grocery stores, restaurants, or households? Just letting some answers come in. Seems like farms and households are the top two, some restaurant. So it's actually indeed households is the largest single source combined of wasted food. So here's kind of the breakdown. Again, this is from ReFed's Insight Engine. So this is an awesome resource if you haven't delved in deeper, but you want to look more at some of the food waste data. I can send this link around. It's insights.refed.com, I believe. So food waste from our homes accounts for 37%. The second largest single source is farms, and then like food service, restaurant, food businesses, restaurants, institutions, and then retail, grocery stores. Sometimes those food service and retail get lumped together in food business sector, but this has broken them out. And then 13% from manufacturing. And so the wasted report of wasted food across the chain. And then the second is what can we do about it? So these next few slides, I'm going to kind of run through. It's a table from wasted, so I don't want to spend a ton of time because there's a lot for me to share. So I'll send you the link to this report if you want to read closer, but we have it broken out by each sector. What are some of the main causes, and then what are some of the solutions to that? So this first one, and I also realize perhaps some of you are on small screens, so bear with me on this. But on the left, we have drivers, and then on the right, remedies or solutions. And we're talking, so this slide shows production, so farming, food production, and some of the main drivers are things like weather, some things we can't quite control, like weather and disease, or food safety, things like that. But there are other things like market conditions, and a crop's price at the time of harvest might not warrant the labor it takes to bring it to market, or buying standards and produce grading, and some crops are being selected for how they appear. And we now, in the past few years, we've seen a lot of secondary markets for quote unquote ugly produce or imperfect produce, like there's imperfect produce and misfits market and these things that are starting to create pathways for some of these excess foods. But so some of the remedies are looking at broadening cosmetic standards, incorporating regional food networks, which can be more flexible in things like that. And I will say that the production and farming side of things is not where NRDC's work is focused. Our colleagues at World Wildlife Fund do a lot more with on-farm stuff. So if you have questions about this, I'll do my best to answer, but it's not quite our area of expertise as much. And another reason for that is there's a lot still we don't know exactly. In the food waste world, we have some data, and like I said, ReFed has collected a lot of it, but there's still, you know, I think we could do a better job and we need more. And it's kind of one of the barriers is that waste characterization studies and things are super expensive and time consuming. And so it's not like we have a meter on our house that tells us how much energy we're using or how much food we're throwing away. It's a bit harder to collect that data. So kind of moving along the food supply chain and processing and distribution, different drivers, as well as different remedies. One of the ones I'll call out here as food expiration dates. And sometimes the date labels don't indicate the best or when the food is safe to eat. They are the manufacturer's best guess at when the food is peak quality. So if things are labeled, it can lead to a lot of confusion. And even myself growing up, my family, we'd like look at the dates and not even look at the food to see if it was still good, but just throw it out. And so that's one of the things I've throughout my life trying to get better at is trusting and using my sense of smell and taste and in that piece. And so that ties into distribution, because if order changes and backups happen and things are looked at by the date and just like completely eliminated without even looking into it, that can cause extra waste. We have a whole bunch on retail. Again, date labels are one thing here too, but lots of reasons. Like I said, I'm not gonna run into these in detail, but I will share the report and I'm happy to talk more. And then this slide is food service. So in restaurants, some things like portion sizes or expansive menu options. Even there was, I think, there have been some studies in institutions of like higher education cafeterias and things about what size plates they're offering, or if they remove trays, does that reduce waste? And so there are like little nudges and things that you can do too. And then this last one is consumers. So the kind of the household end of things at the end of the food supply chain. And a lot of it is around lack of awareness and information, but also lack of access to like composting services and things like that too. And then here we have some policy recommendations, but then some things that everyone could do, like use your freezer more, and things like that. And some of these tips for individuals are also reflected in our Save the Food campaign, which Donna kind of mentioned in my intro, but it's an education campaign that we've developed to inform household cooks and things about different tips and tricks to reduce food waste. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that later too. But so all that to say, lots of different drivers based on the sector. So there's lots of different solutions. And each and every one of us can also play our part in our homes, because homes are the #1 source of food waste. Cool. So just a few more recommendations from the Waster report, and I've pulled out the recommendations for state and local government, but also businesses, because I think Donna mentioned you're also trying to figure out outside of city government, like what can nonprofits and businesses and other folks do. So some of the recommendations for local governments, a top one is banning organics or food scraps from landfills, and that kind of has a downstream effect on separating organics out. This also helps, I think, get to zero waste goals, because I didn't make a slide for this, but food is the #1 source, or #1 like largest single item that gets sent to landfills. And I believe according to EPA's most recent numbers across the country, about 20 to 24% of what we send to landfills is food, which is a lot. So that's where the organics and landfill bans come in. But same with setting targets. We have a national goal to reduce food waste by 50% by 2030. And we've seen a lot of municipal governments also adopt this goal. And then that kind of puts fire behind any other food waste reduction efforts, because you kind of has something to tie all the work together, and a leadership commitment to the work too, which is always helpful. Another thing local governments can do is around figuring out the food donation landscape and helping to incentivize food donation, which we've seen some of our other city partners try to or get more into. For example, the city of Denver in 2019 did a food rescue landscape assessment. So they kind of looked at who were all the possible donors and the last mile organizations, which means like food pantries, or who's giving the food to the people, and how they interact, and then what are the gaps and how could the city be helpful. And one of the things they heard was that it would be really helpful for a convener, for the city to act as a convener to bring all these parties together and identify gaps, or help fill those gaps rather. And it timed up really, I don't know, I was going to say really well, but that's not the right word. It just so happened that this effort was underway and established enough that by the time that the COVID pandemic started, there was this group of food rescue organizations who were meeting together and were able to more nimbly respond to some of the needs that arose right when COVID hit, especially around food insecurity and that sort of thing. So this is, and I would say the government, it doesn't have to be convened by the government. I think it could be like a nonprofit group as well. Anyone really. And I see Jana's comment about a food security meeting, which is awesome. And I'm just reading your comment. Cool, I'll check out the blog. I'm sure it's great. And yeah, these things are, tied together. I mean, food insecurity is really like an economic problem. But at NRDC, we always say like, well, there's excess food, like we should do our best to redistribute that to get it to people, which is where I think this comes in. And then just some things from the business end. A big thing is to conduct food waste audits, which kind of gets at that data gap that I was saying. And I'll share some examples of our city partners who have done this before, but by audit, it's kind of like a bin dig, or, going through your trash and seeing what is being thrown out and why, kind of trying to get to the why and how you can stop that. And that can, help target solutions as well. Investing in innovative efforts, and then also for businesses to set goals and report progress, I think is a big one too. So now I'm gonna talk a little bit more about some of NRDC's other work, and to transition into that, wanted to offer the food recovery hierarchy, which you might have seen, especially those of you working in the zero waste world, kind of follows any sort of waste reduction hierarchy, but this is kind of a lens that we use to inform our advocacy, and it's organized by like the most preferred to least preferred way of dealing with excess food. And at the top, the best way, of course, is to reduce that or make sure food isn't wasted in the first place. But then if there is excess, then it should go to people. if it's good and healthy and edible, I will say. If it's just not, I don't know, banana scraps or banana peels or whatever, then composting is, I think, what we would say the next best use before industrial uses. This is from the EPA, so we at NRDC kind of have our own take on it, but this is kind of the standard one. And then the last resort, of course, is, and hopefully we could avoid landfilling or incinerating. And I just wanted to share that and to just frame kind of why a lot of our work is focused more on prevention and trying to move people up the hierarchy, because a lot of, especially our municipal level partners, foray into food waste reduction work is the zero waste angle, is the composting, is kind of keeping it out of landfill, but that is kind of further downstream. And so we're always trying to look at source reduction and things like that. And partially because focusing higher up brings greater environmental, climate, and social benefits. So if the food is not ending up in the landfill, then all of those environmental issues are kind of mitigated. So this is our kind of version of that hierarchy. We added one at the top called rethink the nature of the problem. So before you do anything, kind of get the data, baseline, whatever, to try to inform what solutions will be most effective. And just a little graphic, like I kind of alluded to, about NRDC's food waste work. We work at the federal, state, municipal, and household level. And across all of that, we have research and reports and work in coalitions and with partners. And we do policy advocacy. And that looks like a bunch of different things right now on the federal front, where I was telling some of you, that's a lot of my work right now. We're entering a farm bill year. So next year, Congress will be working on the Farm Bill, which they do every 5 years, which is huge funding for USDA and a lot of our agricultural program. So we have issued a report on how food waste could be addressed through the Farm Bill, and are working on that. But what I'm really going to spend the rest of this presentation talking about is kind of the municipal food matters city engagement, and then sharing some of our tools and model policies, which are really aimed at anyone, whether you're in city government or nonprofit, to kind of use and take and make your own and work on your own initiatives. So a little background on NRDC's work. We kind of started all of this back in 2012 with the original Wasted report. My old colleague, Dana Gunders, who is now the executive director of ReFed, the organization with the Insights Engine, she was the lead scientist on this paper, which led to the research and establishment of that 40% number. So really kind of established that up to 40% of our food produced is ending up in the landfill. And then since then, taken different avenues at the household level, at the state level, et cetera, to kind of address this problem. So the household lever is the Save the Food campaign. SaveTheFood.com is the website. I highly encourage you to check it out. There's some really cool tips on like where's best to store things in your fridge to help make sure they last the longest, to recipes to use up scraps, and a bunch of different things. So that was launched in 2016 and still going, and still has some resources that you can use. I have a slide about it later. And then in 2017, we kind of started this cities engagement, because we really felt like cities and the municipal level is where the lever of change is for food waste, mostly because waste in our country is managed on the municipal level, and cities can be more nimble than the federal government, and just have more interaction and with people, and are kind of can be more flexible and responded to that. So it started with some research on to what food is wasted and where in 3 cities, Denver, Nashville, and New York City. And then from that, we partnered with the cities of Denver and Baltimore more in depth to support some food waste projects, programs, policies. And then from that, developed a toolkit of some best practices, which is this Tackling Food Waste in Cities toolkit. And I'll share a little bit more about that. But then after the toolkit, which is a bunch of recommendations, we decided that it would be helpful if some of the things that Denver, Baltimore, or some Nashville, or some of our other city partners did were more templatized so that any city could kind of take that idea and make it their own more easily. So that is the 2020 suite of guides and tools here. And then in this past year, we've done kind of building off of all of that, working with 15 cities now. We've looked at state policy and then some of the federal policy, like I mentioned. If you're more interested in the federal policy piece, I would suggest Googling Food Waste Action Plan, and this website is a website. Oh yeah, thank you, Dwayne. I'll put all the links in the chat at the end. But yeah, so we have a federal policy platform as well. And I just quickly wanted to share some state stuff in case that's of interest. Also in the past year, we've seen a few more states make organic waste bans, such as New York City, Maryland, and Washington state, and they join places like Massachusetts, Vermont, California with those organic waste bans. So I think this is a pattern we expect to continue seeing across the country. And one of the other things that was in that timeline were these state food waste policy reports. And so in all the states where our partner cities were, we looked at what food waste laws existed across this menu of laws, including organics disposal bans, state labeling, tax incentives, et cetera, and kind of identified what gaps, what states had these, which didn't, and all of these are on our website too. But I just wanted to share this because I think this is kind of our recommendation kind of menu of things that state policy could do. So diving a little bit more into our city's work, we call it the Food Matters Regional Initiative. Really rolls off the tongue. But so this started in 2020, and we launched 3 regional cohorts with the idea of trying to see if there is anything that, by working with multiple states in a region, could we like leverage something greater on the state policy level. And I think we've learned that it takes a lot longer than, of course, policy takes a long time. I mean, we knew that going into it, but the funding we had was for 2 to 3 years in these, so they're kind of wrapping up. And we've seen awesome work on the city and municipal level, and I think the state work is just getting started. So these are the cities we worked with, and I'll just share a couple examples from these. Oh, well, actually, first, the cities as part of the initiative are working on a couple of these 7 strategies. So each city kind of chose a few strategies to work on. And I just wanted to share this as an example of some things that could be done. The first one is around goal setting and that sort of thing. So enacting a city ordinance or official acts that could set targets for waste reduction, or kind of any sort of policy thing was under bucket number 1. Bucket number 2 is about audits and getting more baseline data. Number 3 is around implementing organic waste collection, or within city buildings, or with community locations. So like, for example, the city of Baltimore launched a bunch at farmers markets across the city, collection. And then the city of Chicago is building composting, collection and composting at community gardens across the city. Another strategy is around including prevention messaging, like some of the stuff that the Save the Food campaign offers. But it's really about, number 4 is really about community education, raising awareness, but also kind of behavior change and driving towards action. Another strategy is engaging businesses. This could be done through something like a food waste challenge. In the city of Denver, they had, this was in 2019, so unfortunately, they obviously haven't been as effective during COVID times when restaurants are super strapped, but previously, it was a good way to engage like restaurants in reducing food waste and then kind of making it a fun competition. Another way to engage businesses could be through health inspectors. And this is something that the city of Denver has also done, but also Minneapolis and some Nashville and some other places where food or health inspectors have contact with all food businesses in the city, and they can be messengers for if you're trying to increase food rescue or other things. So like in Minneapolis, they developed a like training program and like handouts that health inspectors could take when they make their food visits and share information on here's how you can store food and prepare it for donation safely. And like, we actually encourage this. And sometimes that message could be helpful coming from the health department. So that's another kind of tool we have as well. And that ties into number 6. And then the last one is around food rescue assessment. Like I mentioned, Denver did, Chicago's doing one right now, and trying to see how the city could help, or anyone help with gaps in infrastructure. So here are a couple more examples of work that's been going on. I mentioned Chicago's doing the community composting pilot. So rolling this out on a citywide level, because Chicago's a huge city, they've done a pilot around installing free bin composters at community gardens and then also collection. So kind of seeing where that's going. The city of Madison has done a Madison-specific messaging campaign to educate residents and businesses on waste prevention strategies, and they got a local artist to do it, and it was super cool, like to see in community engagement and stuff. The city of Orlando did food waste audits at their neighborhood rec centers who were serving the after-school meal and snack program. So they wanted to see what kind of waste was coming, if any of the food was being wasted and why, and they found out that their meal provider was only giving cold meals. They had switched from doing hot meals, and a lot of the cold meals were ending up in the trash. And that was kind of one of the reasons why, is that no one liked the food. And so they wouldn't have known that if they hadn't actually gone and dug deeper into this. And so they've switched their vendor and are going to do another round of audits to see if that's helped. Baltimore, like I said, did the food scrap pilot drop-offs at the farmers markets. And then I'll just share the last one. Memphis is the city we're working with, and we're actually not working with the city there. We're working with a nonprofit group called Clean Memphis. And so when I say cities, I mean it like broader than just what the city government could do, because some of our partners actually are nonprofits or outside of the city. So there's a lot I think anyone can do. And Memphis really started with focusing around storytelling and sharing stories of local food businesses and food rescue efforts, and kind of trying to strengthen connections that way. So I'm mindful of time. I have a few more slides. I'll just kind of go through them quickly. But last thing on this I wanted to say is that, like I said, our regional initiative is kind of wrapping up throughout the rest of this year and then early next year. And we're thinking about what the next phase of our city municipal engagement is. And we, as you can kind of see in this graphic, are expanding, not limiting ourselves to a region, and thinking about working with different organizations or cities on one strategy. And this will kind of launch early next year. And it's kind of going to be an open call for applications, and the application is going to be super short because we don't want to make a big burden. And then we'll have like a call to kind of suss out what this project could look like, but it could be anything from, hey, I want feedback on this food waste reduction strategy, to I want to run a restaurant challenge, or I have this education campaign materials, can you take a look at it? Like, it could be a lot of different things. So just want to share this is an opportunity that will be coming down the pipeline. Okay, so my last section is kind of what other things are out there that NRDC has made to kind of support this work. So I've alluded to our policy and programs toolkit. We have a bunch of reports like Wasted and some other original research. We have those tools, templatized tools and guides that I mentioned. We also have a ton of case studies from our city partners, and we'll be putting out some more based on this regional initiative one in the next few months. So there'll be more there. And then we also have some model policy, municipal policies, and we're going to continue to build this out in the next year too, but I'll get into that really quick because I think that could be of interest as well. So this is the toolkit. It's also on our website, which is nrdc.org/food matters. Let me see if I have it up. And the toolkit kind of shares across the food reduction hierarchy what are different strategies that can be done. And it's really there for people to look at and pull out what they think would be most effective. And it offers better, best, and like good options for each strategy. So like, if you don't have a lot of time or money, here's a good thing you could do. But in the ideal world, like, here's what the better thing looks like. So it's kind of like a mix and match. Reports I talked about, the Food Matters report looked at and estimating quantities and types of food waste, looked at what was being wasted in Nashville, Denver, and Baltimore. So we did bin digs, we did surveys with residents to try to get a picture of what kinds of food are wasted and how much. And that informed a report, or actually that informed a tool we developed called the baseline calculator, which I'm going to share a little bit more about later. And then the Feeding a City report, look, we've run this baseline calculator that establishes a food waste baseline around 20 to 25 different times with different cities. And so the Feeding a City report looks at all of those baseline calculator results and compares them city to city to kind of see like the trends. Some of the case studies I pulled out, just some titles, like there's one on Nashville's Zero Waste Master Plan, and technology pilots to prevent waste in school kitchens. And these, I just wanted to say, are kind of hard to find on our website. You'll have to go to the tools for cities section and then scroll down to the more resources and then click on policy resources. Our web design is not the best. But if you have trouble finding this, you can email me. I can send you the link directly as well to any of these, unfortunately. Okay, really quick, model policies, like I started to talk about, but we have two and we're gonna issue more, but the idea of these is to kind of, and we've partnered with the Environmental Law Institute and their legal expertise to kind of write out municipal language ordinances that can be kind of like fill in the blank, and you could, take that and share that with your policymakers. So one of them is on mandatory reporting for large food waste generators. Like I've kind of mentioned, we always want more data, because if you can't manage it, if you can't measure it, is the saying. So there's not a lot of mandatory reporting on food waste activities. So this is a model policy that could get at that. And then another one we have is around compost procurement. So a city could have a procurement policy where they need to procure compost from the area to use in landscaping or any sort of other activity. This slide, a little overwhelming, is all the tools and templatized tools and guides. So there's a lot, and I encourage you to click through. There's things on like running a food waste restaurant challenge, or the food rescue landscape that I've mentioned, bunch of different things. And then lastly, really quick, I mentioned this, but on savethefood.com, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a section that says partner kit. And if you click on that, there's downloadable PDFs of these materials, including the community outreach materials, which are some flyers and things, storage guides, but then in posters, but then we also have social media and mobile web assets that can be used in a larger education campaign too. And these are all available for like co-branding. So if you're interested, let me know. The tools, Sharon, do you mean the Food Matters tools or the Save the Food tools?
That site, the slide that you had just like two back.
Yeah.
The tools, where is that?
Let me.
I'm in the Our Work Safe Food section.
Yeah, I can go to our website really quick and I'll show you.
Great. Thanks.
But so that's pretty much it. This is the last thing that I just wanted to show you about how it works together. And so in the Policy and Programs Toolkit, one of the strategies is to estimate a local baseline level of food waste. And then we have a tool that how to do that. And then this is kind of one of the outcomes where you can get a breakdown of all these different sectors in your city, an estimate of how much waste is coming from each sector, and then a couple recommendations for how to target that. That's kind of the outcome of the baseline calculator. Let me stop sharing really quick and I can go to our website and show you where to find all of this stuff. And then I will stop there.
Thanks.
All right. Let me see. Okay. This is, can you see the website thing?
Not yet.
Oh,
You'll have to share it. Oh, sweet. Thanks.
how about now?
Okay.
Okay. Is there a way to? No.
Oh, I see it. It's down at the bottom.
So, sorry, I can't figure out how to get that thing at the top. Oh, so this is if you went to nrdc.org/food matters, and if you click tool for cities here, it will take you to this section. So these are the reports that I mentioned, but also the templatized tools. We also have a resource library, which is a bunch of different things. And then if you keep scrolling down, and there you'll get to this more resources section, which I wish you could like just send a link to, but you can't. You have to scroll down. And then there's some blogs, older blogs. We're trying to figure out how to get this updated, but like I said, our website's not the best. And then if you click on the policy resources tab, this is where the case studies are, model policies. So this policy resources tab is probably the best. And then all of these guys, I would say. And up at the top, we created this kind of beginner's guide to help you navigate through all these different offerings, because there's a lot. And I know there's a lot of information. So thank you all for bearing with me. I'm sorry I went over, a lot to share, but
No, that's just
I'll
fine.
there.
thank you so much. It's a little overwhelming, and I must say I kept thinking as you were mentioning all of the examples, the things that are being done in various cities and regions, how we can utilize some of those as models for what we could do here in Tucson. So,
yeah, I know it's a lot. So thank you. I would say like check out that beginner's guide because that was really made to kind of help navigate. But another thing I think would be really helpful are some of those case studies. So our partner in Nashville was not the city government. It was also a nonprofit group. So, and they were able to do a lot. They were able to engage the city as well. But the main activity was coming from outside of the city. So I think they're kind of a good example of what could be done with a lot of energy. And then I think the other thing I would say is kind of check out some of the recommendations from that Feeding a City report, because like I said, it's the summary of all the baseline calculators of the city. And so it kind of takes some lessons learned of like, where is your best effort targeted? Maybe it's residents, but maybe I know like Tucson's university town, like hospitals, like those things could also be, I bet they're bigger than some other cities.
well, this is probably a good time for us to be thinking about this topic as the city is developing its climate action plan, and also really looking into zero waste and developing that aspect of city life. And it's something that the Zero Waste Committee of Sustainable Tucson has been looking into. Donna in particular is focusing on what we might do to combat food waste here in Tucson. And Donna, I don't know if you want to put your email in the chat if people want to get in touch with you to get involved a bit more with what the work that you're doing. It would be great to have people participate. There was, now I need to go up. I want to go up. We had one question in the chat here from Joyce. Joyce says, we set up a city composting program where people bring in food and yard waste and pick up compost in return. Seems like a win-win-win. Yes, it does. That was 40 years ago. Any ideas why such programs have stalled instead of proliferated? Any sense about?
Yeah, I see the comment now. I will have to think about that. One thing that brings to mind is around just like the policy infrastructure to support these things, like, which is why I think organic bans are so helpful, because if there's not kind of that like stick, then these programs that are being run maybe on discretionary funds tend to get cut first.
Yeah, unfortunately, that seems to be the case. Joyce is also asking if there's info for setting up green recycling like several other cities have.
Yeah, I couldn't find a link. So another organization called Center for Ecotechnology that we work with and is also great. They have kind of a toolkit on this. And I just in the chat, I know there's a ton of questions that I didn't get. And I know we're kind of at time. I see some hands, but I'm saving the chat and I'll write out some responses and then I can email them to Donna, and then maybe Donna, you can share them around.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. And first of all, thank you. And thank you to NRDC for all the amazing work they're doing. But how do you sort of evaluate the success of the programs that you have initiated or that you become involved in?
Yeah.
Do you have
Also,
a way of doing that?
Also a good question. As I kind of alluded to, the data collection can be hard. So we've relied on surveys mostly, and then any sort of metric self-reported numbers that we can get around compost collection. Like, for example, at the Baltimore Farmers Market, they bought scales so that they could actually measure how much is being dropped off. But other than that, we really do rely a lot on what's the word, qualitative reporting, and surveys and that sort of thing. And we're talking ideally about changing the culture and how we interact with food, and that's such a long-term project. It's hard sometimes to see some of those short-term things, but.
Well, we've got 2 hands up. Kevin, you want to unmute and ask your question?
Let's do it.
And then
Yes, thank you. Great presentation.
Okay.
I have a question about the idea, and everything I've read indicates that one of the best ways the cities can do, actions the city can take to reduce local greenhouse gas emissions is to divert organics from the local or regional landfill. And our city, and I think many others, is trying to figure out how to capture the methane and then repurpose it somehow. Would that act as a disincentive to divert organic waste, because that kind of infrastructure would be pretty expensive, and would that act as a disincentive for the city to set up some real comprehensive programs, curbside collection, drop off, work with nonprofits on food waste prevention, rescue, donation? I mean, is that methane gas recovery system going to be a problem long term?
Yeah, I wish my colleague Darby were here, who's kind of our compost and methane and AD person. So I'll try to get her thoughts and relay them as well. And I guess, I think the methane, I don't exactly know the status of the methane capture technology and how close we are to implementing that on a large scale. But to better understand, I guess, are you suggesting that if this methane capture would happen at landfill? So was that going to
I just want to know if can methane capture coexist and repurposing coexist with a very broad food waste prevention and reduction program that would divert significant amounts of organics from the landfill? Can they coexist basically?
I think if it's right sized, I think it could. Similar questions about AD and some of those other management things, if you put all your eggs in the methane capture basket, then yes, I think that would not, it kind of has to be balanced and built into the idea, especially if I think prevention, like I said, is the #1 goal. And so if you're working towards that, then you're going to have less maybe thing to create methane in the first place. So I think it's about, finding the right scale for everything.
Thank you.
And Stuart, good to have you with us.
Thanks, Paula, and thank you, Nina. I appreciate Kevin's question, and I'd like to acknowledge that he got us going as a group to submit 5 proposals to the city for their climate action plan. One of those being food waste reduction, which was produced by Donna. So we're very curious about all these things. And I've got a kind of, political question to ask. we sent the proposals in April. They were acknowledged. And once or twice in conversations with people in the city, they said, yeah, we've got your things. And thank you. You know, they're being considered. We have not been invited back into the conversation on the climate change plan. Is that typical, or does each municipality have its way of deciding how much they're going to use the input of their nonprofits?
Yeah, I think, you know, each city definitely operates differently. And I think we've been able to find success in some city partners because there are like one or two dedicated people. And we've also seen like if the issue's not at the forefront of some of the staff working on it, then they don't care as much. And I just think sometimes that's how politically things go, is if it's not someone's top priority, then it's not always included. And I mean, I think it's hard. I'm trying to think of some examples of how other non-city groups have been effective. And I can definitely circle back. But it's, I think, often about finding like the right person or champion. And I know a lot of city staff are also like underpaid and overworked, and maybe they just don't have the time to, unfortunately, consider everything.
Well, yes, thank you. I know in another county where we had a champion sitting on the board of supervisors, and that just gave everything wheels and wind in the sails.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to relationships. Even if you have all the statistics and reports and whatever, it's, you know, it's a lot too. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Nina, I'm not sure what laws there are in other states, but in Arizona, the legislature has passed all sorts of really interesting legislation, like the ban the bag ban, which says you can't have a rule that says you can't have disposable bags or something like that. Are there laws that you've recognized in Arizona that may hinder us in doing things, or you just don't know about Arizona?
Because we haven't worked with anyone super closely in Arizona yet, I will say I don't have a good answer for you. But I think ReFed on their website might have a state policy tracker, which looks at all those policies that was kind of listed on that slide, and like what's per state. So I would suggest looking at that and seeing what's listed for Arizona. I don't think there's any like preemption laws, like you can't compost, for example. But I just right now.
Let me just, I can just actually interject, because I've looked at the ReFed website, and I mean, really the only things that are relevant are that in the state of Arizona, you can actually donate. Individuals and organizations, businesses can donate food and get a tax deduction. And I think a lot of businesses probably don't realize that. Also, restaurants can donate leftover food and get a tax deduction for it. So those really are two things that are to our benefit, but I just don't think people know about them. Yeah.
Yeah.
From Shannon.
I just wanted to circle back to what Kevin was talking about, and I think he probably knows more about the city direction or policy about the methane capture technology. We did look into that. And the program I was in last year with USDA helping to sponsor farmers with anaerobic digesters, which do capture the methane. And then not only does it generate additional income for farmers, but it also powers thousands of homes. So I don't recall what the number is, but that is a beneficial technology in that respect that could be appealing to the city to do something like that. But I also understand what I think you were getting at, Kevin, is that we want to reduce the amount of food waste and not just create fuel for the methane capture technology. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I'll let Kevin or anyone else speak to that, but I just will add that's part of the reason why we think that, like, you know, renewable natural gas in quotations, if we're talking about AD and stuff like that, is not technically renewable because it's dependent on us creating more, throwing out more things, and so it's kind of a misnomer, and something that we're kind of looking into a little more. So I don't have a great answer, but yeah, thank you, Shannon.
I'll just make a quick comment on that. The anaerobic digesters that are large enough and centralized enough work pretty good for what they're used for, even though you're right, it's not totally renewable. But I think what Kevin was talking about is the city is looking at spending a lot of money to put in capture lines in the city landfill for the methane. And so that would divert money resources that might be used for more beneficially for the reallocation of organics to keep them out of the landfill.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I understand, and the city's been looking at this for several years now, and they're looking at a couple of options. If they were thinking about working with a local gas company or perhaps making some kind of a fuel that can power city vehicles, and I recognize the need to try to get the methane captured and diverted, but at the same time, I'm interested in moving up the hierarchy as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I would hope that it wouldn't be, such a program to recapture that methane at the landfill and repurpose it wouldn't hinder efforts to come up with a broad program focused on food waste prevention.
Nina, if you can talk to Darby, we would really love to hear what she has to say about this. As you can tell, we are in contact with the city, and we'd love to know what we're talking about and know where to put our emphasis.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, I'll respond to some of these questions and send to Donna, but likewise, and sorry, Donna, you're becoming our conduit, but if you have like a specific something you want to write out and I can bring back to my team and get feedback on, please send me that in email. And I will say I do have to run in a few minutes. I know, Dwayne, your hand's up, but maybe that could be the last question.
Sure.
Let me just first say thank you for your presentation. And I particularly appreciated the kind of the first priority, or I can't remember what you called it, but an invitation to rethink our food habits and policy. And I think particularly in light of the fact that the United States is the country with the highest food waste per capita, according to the World Bank. And so we have some fundamental things about our system that we need to be flexible on and be ready to change, and just look at what the rest of the world does and maybe learn from a lot of other practices. What I was going to add in that vein is, I think the whole food system in Arizona, we have a lot, like a third of our state's water use goes toward growing cattle feed. And that is maybe not a directly thing that you might think of as food waste, but it's a it's a messed up priority, that if we were to use that agricultural resource instead for growing food that plant-based food that humans could eat, we could use less water overall and have a better, healthier diet. And anyway, so bigger thoughts about how our system can be improved. There are many ways, and I guess that's one way. One of those would be avoiding some unneeded food production.
Yeah, definitely.
And it would keep more of the water here in Arizona instead of sending it via alfalfa to Saudi Arabia. But that's a different matter altogether. Okay, well, Nina, thank you so much. This was a really great, informative talk. Gave us lots of ideas, including trying to look into how we might get Tucson or one or another organization in Tucson working with NRDC on this issue. Something to tuck in the back of your mind to explore further. As I said at the beginning when we started recording, we will put the recording up on the Sustainable Tucson YouTube channel. And the link to the recording will replace the Zoom link on the website announcement. And I'm sure Jana will be glad to post it on our Facebook page so that you can refer back to all of this wonderful information and continue with some ideas about how to reduce food waste here in Tucson. We will make sure to save the chat so that we've also got all of the information that people were sharing and be able to check out anything that needs follow-up. So again, thank you so much, Nina. We'll look forward to seeing more about your wonderful work at NRDC. And thanks to Donna for making this happen, making this possible. And to all of you, a reminder to be sure to vote in the coming election. This is the last, up till midnight, I think you have the chance to register if you're not registered yet. I'm sure everyone here is registered. Just get out and vote.